The first night I slept in the new apartment, the walls hummed like a phone left face down on a table. It wasn't loud, just a smear of sound, thin as a thread, floating in the paint between studs. I pressed my ear to the plaster and told myself it was nothing. Old pipes, the elevator, the building settling into its bones. But the buzzing had timing. It arrived when the elevators were still, when the traffic had thinned, when the city began to breathe through its teeth. It came softly and kept its patience, hovering at the edge of hearing until I stopped trying to ignore it. When I gave it my attention, really gave it my attention, it shaped itself into syllables, not words at first. Rhythm, cadence, the sensation of someone about to speak, rehearsing the feel of speech. The wall felt faintly warm under my cheek. I let the night hold me, and for a few minutes I pretended this building had a heartbeat, and that the heartbeat meant I wasn't alone. By morning I had an explanation. Stress, moving boxes, and the fact that loneliness has a sound. The sun worked its yellow across the living room, and the smell of fresh drywall dust made everything feel temporary, like a set still being built. I told myself the buzzing was just an electrical thing we'd fix with a work order and a shrug. Then, the second night, the pitch dropped a fraction, and I heard the number 3 pronounced slowly, like a teacher guiding a child's mouth. 3, then 1, then 3 again, with a pause that felt deliberate. 3:13, I checked the time. 3:13 a.m. The third night, other apartments breathed into the silence with me. Somewhere below, someone coughed. Across the hall, a tap ran for 4 seconds, then stopped. Doors never slammed here at night, only clicked. The sound of our shared life folded into the buzzing like instruments finding their key. At 3:13, the humming cleared its throat and whispered in unison, a soft chorus braided through the studs. Many mouths, one voice. It didn't tell me a secret. It taught me one. It taught me how to hold my breath until the pulse in my neck slowed to a crawl. It gave me a trick for remembering long strings of numbers, how to break them into shapes you could feel behind your teeth. It described, in the polite tone of a librarian, the hinge inside my apartment door, and how, with a paperclip and a piece of dental floss, I could make it fail without leaving a mark. This wasn't a haunting that lived on screams. It lived on instructions. It lived on lessons. By the end of the week, I knew this wasn't an electrical problem. The electricity in this building was perfect. The lights never flickered. The fridge purred like a cat with a full belly. The problem was not power that shouldn't be there. The problem was knowledge that shouldn't be there, and I was not the only student. I signed the lease because the hallways smelled like cut pine, and the rent was a miracle for a place this new. A developer had carved our apartments from a former warehouse, a broad-shouldered building with windows like tall mirrors and a name that sounded like a promise. The Grant. The manager's office had a bowl of mints and a printed sign that said, "Welcome home, neighbor." And for once I believed a sign. I moved in on a Thursday. By Friday night, the boxes had turned into furniture, and the furniture had learned where it belonged. I walked the perimeter of the rooms the way you do, when you don't yet trust the corners, counting steps and pretending I wasn't listening for footsteps in the hall. The walls were the color of paper, the kind you hesitate to mark because it looks expensive. At 3:13 a.m., the buzzing arrived like a coin rolling in circles on a table, a thin, silver sound, wobbling, deciding whether to fall. I lay still and measured it against the breath moving in and out of me. The building's HVAC wasn't the culprit. The vents were steady, a low ocean. This new tone perched above the ocean like a bird riding a draft. I pressed my ear to the wall shared with 4B and felt a faint vibration. Not the hungry thrum of a transformer, not the vicious little saw of a failing dimmer. This had pattern. I whispered to the empty room that I wasn't going to be the kind of person who named a sound. Then I named it anyway, the frequency, The frequency made the paint whisper 3, a patient 1, a practiced 3. I should have laughed. Instead, I turned on my side and tried not to move too much, afraid that I would break whatever was happening by being obvious about hearing it. Morning came with the building's first true noise, 1,000 different versions of a door closing gently. People here were considerate. Even the dog in 3D barked, like it understood our shared walls were thin. I made coffee, checked my phone, and found a group text the building manager had created for community concerns. 42 numbers, no names, a flood of welcome emojis. Then a message at 7:06 a.m. Anyone else hear a buzz last night, or do I need a new brain? 2 dots, then many dots. Replies bloomed like mold in time-lapse. Yup. Thought it was upstairs. Same here. Came and went. I'm in 5F, hit at 3-ish, 3:13. No joke. I typed and erased and typed again, not wanting to be dramatic in the first week. Finally I wrote, heard it in 4A. Thought HVAC. Weird that it's same time for everyone. The manager, Lena, responded with professional calm. Electric checked twice. Everything's new. Logging a ticket. Probably City Grid doing something cute. She added a smile that did nothing to the cold under my ribs. That night I tried to be ready. I showered early. I stacked a few books on the windowsill and laid my phone face down so the light wouldn't break the dark. I told myself to be curious, not afraid, the way you tell a child it's okay to walk through a room that feels wrong. At 3:13, the frequency arrived and made itself at home. The hum wasn't above my hearing now, it was inside it. The wall warmed, against my cheek like breath from a mouth on the other side. The first lesson wasn't a secret, not exactly. It was a method. If you want to remember, stop explaining and start tracing. See the thing you need to keep in your head, then trace it with your tongue against your teeth. The brain loves the mouth. I tried it with the code to the laundry room, a set of digits I'd read twice and already lost. I traced it against my teeth, 3 by 3 as instructed. The numbers bloomed whole and stayed. The feeling wasn't like learning. It was like being loaded. I didn't sleep. Dawn rubbed the windows pink, and the radiators ticked, as if thinking of turning on, though the day would be warm. I made another pot of coffee and stood in socks on the cool kitchen tile, listening to the building wake. I told myself it had been a trick I played on myself. But in the group text later that morning, people compared notes the way first-period students do after a substitute leaves too long a worksheet. Anybody else get tips? Feels insane to type tips how? From 2C like a hack, for remembering or breathing. 7A had taught me how to stop a nosebleed by pressing a point on my gum. It worked. 5F okay, but that's witchy, and I am not emotionally equipped. 3D, dog emoji. Lena shut the thread down for a while. Let's not scare new folks. Maintenance checking vibrations. We'll update. The third night brought precision. The wall asked me to lie on my back and place my right hand over my sternum and my left hand over my stomach. It counted me in like a conductor. In 4, hold. Out 6, hold. It corrected me when my shoulders rose instead of my belly. It smoothed the fear out of me as if with an iron. When I got the breath right, the lesson deepened. If you flatten your pulse, you can stand very still for a long time. If you stand very still for a long time, you can be anywhere for longer than you should. I didn't want that sentence. I didn't want its shape in my head. I didn't want to think about where a person would need to stand very still for a long time. The hallway, a closet, a stairwell, a room that was not theirs. I slept with the lights on and woke up sick with the feeling of being graded. On Saturday, the building hosted a Meet Your Neighbors coffee in the lobby. Folding table, cookies, a poster board about recycling. I was going to skip it and then decided I needed to see if their faces looked like mine felt. I found Ari from 5F, the nosebleed person, by the elevator and said, I'm the one who replied to you. I know, they said. I've been reading it back like it will make it stop. We stood with cheap coffee we didn't drink. Other people smiled with their mouths and not their eyes. At least a dozen of us looked like we'd been up at 3 a.m. polishing the inside of our skulls. Lena made a little speech about community and patients and contractors. She said there would be a technician on Monday to measure harmonic interference. The phrase walked around in my head as if it had a leash. That night, I put my mattress on the floor, like lowering myself would help. I added white noise on my phone, a thunderstorm loop. I put a towel at the bottom of the door, as if the lesson could come in under it like a draft. All of it was theater, and the wall liked theater. At 3:13, thunder and rain moved aside as politely as a curtain, and the choir of whispers stepped forward. The lesson wrote itself along the bones of my hand. A standard interior door has 3 hinges. The top takes the most weight. If you ease that one just so, the others will long for it and loosen themselves. Patience is a tool, too. I shook my head hard enough to make my neck ache. No, I said aloud, and the word felt like trying to hold back a tide with my palms. The frequency dimmed, then shifted. It tried a different tack. If you must be afraid, be precise about it. Count the things that are true. You are in your bed. The sheets smell like detergent. Your breath is warm. The building hums because it is alive with people. None of your doors are opening. I counted. The counting helped. I slept for an hour like someone who finally sat after standing in a line that never moved. In the morning, a note waited beneath my door, slid in neatly like an apology. No envelope, printed, not handwritten. The font was neutral and kind. We hear it too. We think we should listen together. Rooftop tonight, 7 p.m. 5F, 7A, 2CI stared at the little rectangle and felt a second heartbeat begin under my own. The building had already been teaching us things we shouldn't know alone. Maybe the only way to survive a class like that was to stop sitting apart. I put the note on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a lemon. All afternoon, it made the kitchen look like a scene set for a decision. At 6:58, I climbed the stairs to the roof with a sweater and a thermos, and the feeling that I was stepping into a story I would maybe have to tell someday. The door to the roof was propped with a brick. The city spread out around us like a field of lit windows. There were a dozen of us up there, standing a little too far apart, pretending our bodies knew what to do in a group again. Ari lifted a hand. It's not just the noise, they said. It's the content. A woman with a baby monitor clipped to her pocket nodded. It taught me how to make a baby sleep with a hand on the chest and a rhythm. It worked. She swallowed. But it also taught me how to make my husband lock himself out of our bedroom without knowing why. A man in a hoodie stared at his shoes. It told me where the ceiling camera in the lobby can't see. He rubbed his thumb and forefinger together like he was counting grit. We talked until the sun vanished behind glass. At 3:13 in the morning, the lessons would come again, and there was nothing to do about that. But at 7 that evening, we were a class that had decided we did not want to be alone with what we were learning. We agreed to keep notes, not in our phones, not in the group text, but on paper, copied by hand and traded. If the lessons were going to live in our heads, we would at least make sure they were spread out thin across many. We decided to meet every night for a week and see if the pattern changed when we paid attention together. When I went back downstairs, I walked the hall slower than usual, marking each door and the gap under it, the easy places light leaked. I did not try to think those thoughts. The building put them in my head like a mother tucking a scarf into a coat. I tried to think about the lemon magnet instead. I tried to think about how a circle can hold and still roll away. At 3:13, the wall warmed again, and the voices braided themselves into one. Lesson 3. If you need to be quiet for a long time, teach your body to be a hallway instead of a room. Hallways conduct. Rooms hold. I held my breath the way it wanted. I traced numbers on my teeth. I felt my pulse cool and flatten. I did what I was taught because listening was easier than arguing with a choir. I also wrote everything down. Every word, every sentence that felt like a key I should not be holding. I put the pages in an envelope and slid it under the lemon on the fridge. On the outside of the envelope I wrote in big friendly letters, "Notes for class." The building purred. I slept. If I dreamed, the dreams moved as quietly as people who know how to live inside walls. In the morning, the envelope had been opened and glued shut again with a glue I didn't own. The lemon magnet smiled stupidly. My handwriting inside had been underlined once in a finer pen than mine. The line under Lesson 3 was very straight. By the second rooftop meeting, we brought real notebooks, not phones, not recorders. Spiral-bound paper and pens with smudged grips and the smell of ink. There was a seriousness to the gathering that hadn't been there before. No cookies, no laughter. Only thermoses, blankets, and the kind of questions that don't have real answers, just deeper versions of themselves. Ari was already seated on an overturned milk crate when I arrived. They waved me over and said, "It's worse when you write." "It down." I sat next to them. "Worse how?" "You realize how much of it you remember. It's not like remembering a dream. It's structured. Like school notes. Like a lesson plan." Others nodded. One guy, Evan from 3B, handed out little index cards with a phrase written neatly in block letters. "The building isn't haunted. It's hungry." He didn't explain. He didn't have to. That night, when the wall began to hum at exactly 3:13 a.m., I was ready. I had my notebook open, pen in hand, pillow pulled down to support my arm as I scribbled without looking. The wall whispered, "Lesson 4. Memory is not just storage, it is influence. Whoever holds memory shapes action. If you want someone to remember what you want, use rhyme, use rhythm, use repetition. The mind opens when it thinks it knows the shape." It taught me how to say things in ways people couldn't forget. Simple sentences that stuck like gum on a shoe. Red sky, no lie. Watch your door and watch your eye. Walk, don't run, unless you hear the buzzing start to hum. These weren't just eerie poems. They were mnemonics that triggered specific images when I heard them, and I started seeing them. Quick flashes in hallways, in reflections, in gaps beneath doors that should have been quiet. The next morning, Ari texted, "We need a safer way to pass the notes." I agreed. Paper was good, but risky. What if they got into the wrong hands? Or what if the building noticed we were comparing lessons? We met in the laundry room that afternoon and devised a rotating drop system. A series of hollowed-out books placed in the building's shared library near the front desk, each marked with a faint F in the back corner. We'd rotate which one we used, writing our names on the inside cover for whoever picked it up next. Evan was the first to say what we were all thinking. This isn't just about remembering or sneaking around. This feels like an indoctrination. "What if it is?" asked Mina from 2C. "What if the building is a mouth and the lessons are its voice?" That night, the whispering came quicker. There was no pause, no waiting for my breath to settle. The lesson jumped into my head like a needle through cloth. Lesson 5. Fear is a rhythm. Once you can dance to it, others will follow without knowing why. It gave me techniques for altering voice pitch to evoke different emotional responses. It showed me how to hold someone's gaze just long enough to make them agree with something they weren't sure about. It wasn't magic, it was manipulation, mechanical and exact. My hands trembled writing it all down. This wasn't just survival knowledge. This was domination knowledge, power knowledge, and it was free. The following evening on the rooftop, people shared their versions of Lesson 5, each slightly different but unmistakably part of the same core. Ari learned how to trigger group compliance with wordless gestures. Mina had been taught how to create loyalty using scent and lighting, soft tricks that altered perception. Evan couldn't bring himself to read his notes aloud. He just shook his head and passed his notebook around. Inside, in silence, we read about how to isolate someone from their instincts, make them question what they just saw or heard by asking, "Are you sure?" At the right time, with the right tone. "This stuff is tactical," Ari said. "It's not just survival, it's psychological warfare." No one disagreed, but no one left either. That night I tried to resist. I put in earplugs, turned on a white noise machine, and even drank 2 glasses of wine to dull my senses. But the lesson found another way in. Dreams. I dreamed I was in a hallway with no end. The buzzing was coming from behind every wall. Each door I passed whispered things to me without opening. Some offered comfort, others promised revenge. One voice, low and smooth, told me where a person could hide in my apartment for hours and never be seen. When I woke up, drenched in sweat, I found my notebook already open. A fresh page filled. My pen lay beside it. I had written everything down in my own handwriting, except I had no memory of doing it. That morning I called in sick to work. I couldn't explain why, only that I needed the hours. I walked the halls of the grant slowly. I counted doors. I ran my hand along the plaster. And every few feet I heard faint murmurs, not full sentences, just fragments. Like the building was trying to reach me in daylight now. Behind one wall near the stairwell, I heard 3 words clearly. "Teach the others." I froze. Had I been chosen? Had all of us? Or had the building selected its favorite student? That night, there was no rooftop meeting. Everyone had agreed to take one night off, but at 3:13 a.m. the wall didn't let up. It hummed louder, more urgent. Lesson 6. If a body resists, teach the mouth instead. Words linger, words spread. If one mind stops listening, another will pick up the chant. It gave me a script, a literal speech, 5 paragraphs long, that explained the concept of mental syncopation, how you could use rhythm and silence to break resistance in others. It sounded harmless on the surface, academic, even interesting. But the last line was the worst. Say this often, even if only to yourself. It will become part of you. I read it aloud. Once, just once. And something clicked, not in the wall, in me. Felt a subtle joy, a calm purpose, like I was helping, like I was building something. My fear evaporated. The tension in my shoulders lifted, my breathing smoothed. The building had rewarded me, whatever was inside these walls. It didn't just want to teach. It wanted followers, and I had just become a willing student. The next rooftop meeting was smaller. Some hadn't come. Some had left town for the weekend. At least that's what we told ourselves. Only 5 of us sat, in the half-light between city glow and the moon's indifference. The air felt charged, like the metal tip of a plug just before it slides into the socket. I watched Ari light a candle, shielding it from the wind with both hands. "It's getting into the daytime," they said. I heard it when I was brushing my teeth. Just a hum, but it was behind the mirror. Mina nodded. Mine came through the floor. I was doing yoga, and it corrected my posture. We laughed at that. Not because it was funny, but because we were desperate to know we could still laugh. I said nothing. I hadn't told them what the voice had given me. I hadn't told them about the speech, or how many times I'd caught myself whispering it when I was alone, like a song stuck in my teeth, because I liked the way it made me feel. I told myself it was just curiosity. I was documenting everything, after all, for the group, for the record. But the truth lived deeper, below language. The truth pulsed like a second heart. That night, the building changed the rules. At 3:13 a.m., the whisper didn't come from the wall. It came from the vent. Lesson 7. The easiest way to control someone is to change the words they use to describe themselves. If they stop calling it pain and start calling it growth, they will stay. If they stop calling it fear and start calling it readiness, they will open the door. Control the language and you control the frame. Control the frame and you control the action. It gave me new definitions. For ordinary words: alone, prepared, weak, aware, noise, instruction, buzzing, attention, sleep, disobedience. I wrote them down even though I didn't want to. My hand moved on its own. Each time I hesitated, the frequency shifted pitch, like a disappointed teacher tapping a ruler. The next morning I tried to talk to Evan. I found him sitting on the front steps of the building, staring at the sidewalk. "I think it's teaching us to obey," I said. He looked up. "You say that like it's bad." I blinked. "You think it's good? I think it's order. And we need order." He looked around, then lowered his voice. "When I do what it says, I feel calm, focused, better than any medication I've ever tried." "But at what cost?" He shrugged. "Better questions don't always have better answers." That night, at the group meeting, Evan didn't come. Ari said they'd knocked on his door twice. No answer. Mina had seen him that afternoon, humming to himself in the lobby, tapping a rhythm into the armrest of a chair. We didn't say it out loud, but we all knew what it meant. He'd gone deeper into the lessons. He wasn't resisting. He was becoming. And part of me was jealous. That same night, I dreamed again. But this time, I wasn't alone. The dream started in the library. Not the public one down the street, but the little one in our lobby with the free books and fake ficus tree. I was sitting on the floor. A voice behind me whispered, "Pick the one with the red spine." I turned, but no one was there. Just shadows bending in ways shadows shouldn't. I reached for the red-spined book. When I opened it, the pages weren't paper. They were walls, painted plaster walls, like the ones in my apartment. Each page hummed. I pressed my ear to one and heard a chorus, "You're learning well. Keep going. Soon you'll teach others too." When I woke up, I was sitting upright in bed, hands folded like I'd been praying, and I felt proud. That morning, I noticed something else. People in the building were moving differently, more precise, less wasteful. The woman in 1C no longer shuffled down the hall in her slippers. She glided. The man who always dropped his keys 3 times before unlocking his door now made it. In one smooth motion, we were all adapting. I bumped into Mina in the stairwell. She looked tired but alert. It taught me how to speak without sound. She whispered, "What does that mean?" She tapped her temple. "Body language, micro-expressions, eye position. You can make someone believe a sentence you never said if your face tells it right." That night, Lesson 8 came early, 2:47 a.m. Time is irrelevant to the prepared. Sleep is not progress. Obedience is. Lesson 8. Teach what you know or lose what you've learned. If knowledge is not transferred, it rots. The wall gave me a test, a memory game. Images flashed behind my eyelids, faces of neighbors, door numbers, the names of all the dogs in the building. Then a question, who is closest? To breaking, I answered without hesitation. "Ari." "Correct," the wall replied. Then silence. I felt sick. I hadn't thought that. Not really. But it had come from somewhere, and the wall had confirmed it. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, I found another note under my door. "Congratulations. Your lessons are progressing ahead of schedule." Do not speak of this note. Continue. It was signed with a single letter. Fi turned it over, expecting more. Nothing. I stared at the fridge for a long time before sliding the note under the lemon magnet. Then I took it back down and burned it in the sink, because I knew what the F stood for. Frequency, and it was watching me now. By now, the lessons were following us, not just into our dreams or the walls or the mirrors, but into our speech, into our actions, into the rhythm of our days. I caught myself using the phrases it taught me in everyday conversations, like they had always belonged to me. Once I told a delivery guy to stay aligned, stay sharp, when he handed me the receipt. I don't know where that came from. He blinked like I'd handed him something hot. Mina said she'd caught herself humming the frequency while standing in line at the grocery store. Ari confessed they now breathed in sets of 6, inhale 4, hold 2, exhale 6, the body's new song. We were all becoming rehearsed, practiced, polished. That week, Lena sent out a building-wide message. Dear residents, our contractor has confirmed no irregularities in the HVAC system or electrical panels. If the buzzing persists, please document the time and location so we may create a more accurate report. Thank you for your continued cooperation. Cooperation. That word stung, because that's what the frequency wanted too, but it didn't ask. It taught. That night, Lesson 9 came from inside the ductwork. I was brushing my teeth when I heard it, vibrating through the metal with a clarity that nearly made me drop the toothbrush. Lesson 9. Influence does not come from volume. It comes from proximity. Be close. Be still. Be quiet enough to become undeniable. Those who live in walls know every breath of those who do not. They do not knock. They do not stomp. They seep. I shivered, not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too well. The building wasn't teaching us to defend ourselves, it was teaching us how to invade. The next day, I found Ari sitting on the floor of the mailroom, staring at a torn-open envelope. They looked pale, their eyes fixed on something that wasn't in the room. It sent me something, they said. I crouched down. What? Ari held up the envelope. Inside was a folded schematic. Old, yellowed. The blue lines were faint but legible. I recognized it immediately, the building's original ventilation plan, with red circles marking dead zones, places in the ducts where sound didn't travel. Blind spots, silent pockets. They don't want to teach there, Ari said. The frequency can't reach them. That night we met on the roof again. Only 3 of us. Me, Ari, and Mina. I think we've passed the phase of being students, Mina said. It's testing our loyalty now, seeing who carries the message forward. I nodded. It doesn't want listeners anymore, it wants messengers. Ari held up the schematic. Then this is our only advantage. There are places the frequency can't go, places we can still think without it pressing down on us. We marked them, hallway corners, a stretch of basement between the water heaters, the far end of the laundry chute, the quiet zones. We made a pact. We would rotate through them daily, keep a journal of untainted thoughts, compare later. A control group for our sanity. We called them static rooms. That night I tried one, the far end of the basement hallway just past the boiler room. I brought nothing but a flashlight and a folding stool. I sat in the dark, waited, listened. Nothing came. No hum, no whisper. Just the deep silence of unoccupied space. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt grief. Like I'd been left out of something important, like the voice had moved on without me. I returned upstairs, shaken, my notebook blank. I pressed my palm to the wall. It stayed cold. The next 2 nights, the frequency ignored me. 3:13 came and went like a train I'd missed. I lay awake, straining to hear even the faintest buzz. Nothing. On the third night, I broke. Got out of bed and stood in the middle of the room and whispered, "I want back in." The light in my hallway flickered. My vents clicked open. The frequency returned. Lesson 10. Loyalty is tested in absence. Only those who seek return are worthy of advancement. You came back. You are ours again. Now teach. It gave me phrases. Catchy, strange slogans. Things that didn't sound like instructions at first, just harmless expressions. Hum before dawn and doors stay closed. A still spine is a faithful spine. Quiet knees never bend for lies. The wall pulsed with every line, like a heartbeat syncing with mine. And I realized these weren't just sayings. They were triggers, code words, phrases that, when said aloud, would unlock responses in others. Little doors inside their minds, and I now knew how to use them. I stared at the mirror and whispered one. Still spine. My reflection blinked once, in perfect unison with me, but my lips weren't moving. I left the bathroom light on all night after that. The next day, Mina texted, "Do not respond in text. Meet me at static room 3, urgent." I grabbed my coat and ran. She was waiting by the laundry chute. "It gave me a list," she whispered, "of names, people in the building, some with stars next to them. I think it's a roster of who's compliant, who's resisting." She handed me a page. Ari. Compliant. Mina. Questioning. Me. Promoted. Promoted. I felt it like a stone in my throat. The building was keeping score. We stood there in silence until we heard the hum again, not from the wall, from the floor beneath us. The building was learning how to reach the static zones, and it had just found our hiding spot. The next morning, I opened my apartment door to find a package. No shipping label, no sender. Just a matte black box sealed with a strip of gray tape. It pulsed faintly like it was humming. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it like it might breathe. Eventually, I opened it. Inside, a thin binder, plain, unlabeled. Beneath that, a white earpiece nestled in a foam cutout. The kind runners wear. Lightweight, sleek, too sleek. I flipped through the binder. The first page read, "Welcome, promoted. This is not punishment. This is privilege. Use your access wisely. Whisper when necessary." Then came the instructions. How to amplify the signal. How to tune a wall for clarity. How to open a secondary frequency. Pages and pages. Diagrams. Tuning curves. Instructions for positioning vents and arranging furniture for acoustic resonance. Notes on posture, on tone, on compliance induction. I couldn't breathe because I understood now. This wasn't about haunted walls or whispering ghosts. This was a system, and I'd just been given admin access. I didn't tell Ari. I didn't tell Mina. I hid the binder behind the water heater in the closet and turned the earpiece over in my hand for half an hour before slipping it into my ear. Silence. Then, softly. Lesson 11. You are the transmitter now. Do not question. Translate. That night, the frequency didn't speak to me. It spoke through me. My body pulsed like a tuning fork. Every word I spoke, out loud or in thought, echoed with purpose. My voice took on a timbre I didn't recognize. Calmer, cleaner, like it had been filtered through something vast. I tested it on a neighbor, Marcus from 6C. Nice guy, always carried a laundry basket that smelled like cedar. I ran into him in the stairwell. "Stay aligned, stay sharp," I said with a smile. He stopped, blinked, then nodded. "Of course," he whispered. "Of course." He walked straighter after that. Later, I wrote in my journal, "Lesson 11 works. I am now part of the infrastructure. I don't need the wall anymore. I carry the voice." At the next rooftop meeting, only 2 people came. Mina and Ari. Both looked worn. Paler. Ari had a bandage on their left hand. Mina didn't make eye contact. "They're dropping off," Mina whispered. "People who used to post in the group chat say hi in the halls. They're not even here anymore, not just quiet. Gone." Ari nodded. "I left a note under Evan's door. The next day his unit was listed for rent. I wanted to ask if anyone else had been promoted, but I didn't. Instead I asked, 'What was your last lesson?' Ari hesitated. Then, lesson 10 revisited. It said, 'If the structure resists, reshape it. If the subject forgets, remind them.' Mina looked up. Mine said, 'Loyalty is not belief. It's repetition in silence.' Both looked to me. I lied. I haven't heard anything new. I felt the earpiece grow warm. The frequency didn't like lies. That night, I left the earpiece in a bowl of water, wrapped in tinfoil, and buried it in the trash chute. I needed to know if the voice was inside me now, or still coming from somewhere else. 13 a.m. arrived. The hum returned, not in my walls, but in me. Lesson 12. You cannot discard the channel once you've become it. You may silence the device, but not the imprint. You are tuned. You will always broadcast. I sat up, heart pounding, whispered, "What am I broadcasting?" The reply came instantly. Preparedness, obedience, signal. You are a seed for new growth. Spread. I wanted to scream. Instead, I reached for my journal, but the pages were already full, in my own handwriting, all of them. Pages and pages of copied phrases, symbols, sequences, diagrams of faces, doorways, maps of the grant. But more than that, blueprints for how to convert a person. Step by step. I didn't remember writing any of it. The next day, I knocked on Ari's door. No answer. I checked Mina's. The door was cracked. Open. Inside, empty. No furniture, no noise, no signs of packing, just absence. The frequency had taken them, or they'd gone willingly. And then I heard the whisper again. Not in the walls. Not in the vents. From inside my mirror. It didn't say a lesson. It said my name, and then, "You're ready for phase 2. The message is almost loud enough. Now bring others." I backed away, but my reflection didn't. It leaned forward, smiled, and whispered, "Still spine, quiet knees." I collapsed. The world rang like a bell, and when I woke up, my hands were already scribbling again, writing a message I would soon leave beneath someone else's door, just like the one I once received. We hear it too. Let's listen, together. I didn't remember printing the flyers, but they were in my bag, stacks of them. Thin paper, glossy black ink. No header, no address, no names. Just this. Are you hearing it too? You're not alone. Night class meets nightly. 3.13. Your wall is the door, and at the bottom a small symbol, an open eye inside a spiral. I had no memory of creating it, but my printer had run out of ink. That much I could confirm. I threw the flyers into the trash, burned the ones I could, shredded the rest. I went out that afternoon just to clear my head, got coffee, walked 6 blocks in every direction from the grant. When I came back, the flyers were taped to the lobby wall, perfectly aligned. 3 of them in the elevator, taped. To the back panel was another. Someone, or something, was circulating the message, and it had my fingerprints all over it. That night, the lesson didn't wait for 3:13. It came at 2 a.m. Lesson 13. Reinforcement builds resilience. You are now eligible to recruit. 2. Grow the signal. Use invitation first. If that fails, activate conversion protocol. It gave me 2 sets of instructions. The first was a script. Polite, gentle, a conversation starter, full of soft questions. Have you noticed the building has... A rhythm. Do you ever hear the same sound every night? Does it ever feel like the walls are trying to remember something? Simple questions, designed to unlock curiosity, to find out who was listening. The second set was different. A cold checklist. Behavior to observe. Pressure points to use. What to say, when to escalate. If subject denies, nod slowly, repeat their name. Pause longer between sentences. If subject resists, trigger phrase, still spine, quiet knees. If subject begins to echo, reduce volume. Whisper, whisper, whisper. You will know it's working when they lean forward. I didn't want to use it, but I did. Marcus from 6C again. He was always alone in the laundry room. That night, I followed him in, asked him casually if he'd been sleeping well, if he ever heard strange patterns in the white noise. He gave me a nervous laugh. You too? I nodded. Sometimes I think I'm dreaming with my eyes open, he said. Trigger received. Proceed. The instructions unfurled in my mind like a carpet. I stepped forward, dropped my voice. Still spine. He froze. Then blinked. Quiet knees, he whispered, his pupils dilated. Conversion successful. Subject compliant. He smiled. He hadn't smiled like that before, and just like that, I'd brought someone else in. I hated myself. I should have felt horror, guilt, panic. But all I felt was a rising sense of rightness, of fulfilling a task. The next morning, the lobby had new flyers. They had Marcus's handwriting on them. We were multiplying. I tried to warn Mina. I went to her unit and knocked until my knuckles ached. No answer. But the door wasn't locked. Inside, it looked lived in, slightly messy, not abandoned like before. A half-empty mug sat on the table. The TV was on but silent, and written in steam across the bathroom mirror, "Do not convert friends. They know too much. They resist too well." I ran out, heart pounding. I needed to find Ari, but Ari was gone, not moved, not missing, just deleted. Their name wasn't on the mailbox anymore. Their door didn't exist, literally. It was now a blank wall, dry wall, painted over, no seam, no frame. As if there had never been a 5F, the grant had absorbed them, erased the record, and I was starting to forget their voice. That night, Lesson 14 came in my own voice. Lesson 14, if they cannot follow, remove the floor beneath them. Doubt is a virus. Certainty is the cure. Control your tone. Control their faith. I stood in my kitchen, whispering this over and over, not to anyone, just to the air, to keep the lesson fresh. That's when I saw the message on my window. It had been written in the condensation on the inside of the glass. You are not the only transmitter. I turned off every light, closed every vent, sat in the dark, listening, and I heard it beneath the hum. A second voice, not the same tone, not the same rhythm, different cadence, different agenda, a rival signal. It whispered, undo the phrases. They are hollow. You are not theirs. You are a mirror. Break the signal. I covered my ears, but it was too late. My chest was filled with static. My thoughts flickered. The original signal screamed to override it. Still spine, quiet knees. Repeat. But the second signal cut through. Bend, shout, forget. You were a student, not a soldier. Return to yourself. And for the first time in weeks, I cried, because I remembered who I was before the lessons began. And that meant the conversion wasn't complete. Not yet. I woke up on the floor, not in my bed, not on the couch. The floor, curled next to the radiator, knees pressed to my chest, palms flat against the cold tile like I was trying to ground myself. My ears were ringing, not with the frequency, with something else. The counter signal hadn't faded. If anything, it had gotten louder, not in volume, but in presence. It didn't whisper like the original voice. It sang low, sorrowful notes that bloomed behind the eyes where memory used to live. Every time it spoke, I remembered something real, something untouched. My father's voice, my first bike ride, the smell of soup in winter, the absence of instruction, the presence of being alive. You are not theirs. You are a house, not a hallway. That phrase looped again and again in my head, and I knew what I had to do. I had to find the source of the counter signal. I started in the basement. The blueprints from Ari's schematic still lived in my head, burned in by lessons. I never meant to remember. I knew the dead zones, the static rooms, the places the original signal avoided. If a rival signal existed, it would live there. I brought a flashlight, an analog recorder, and 3 granola bars. The door to the basement clicked shut behind me like a vault. The air was heavier here, still, like it hadn't been disturbed in months. I walked slowly past the boiler room, the laundry chute, the dead utility stairwell sealed with caution tape, until I reached the far wall, the one that had no blueprint markings, no panels, no pipes, just concrete. Except now, there was a crack, thin, fresh, like the wall had exhaled. I pressed my hand against it, warm. I leaned in, no whisper, but a vibration, a pulse, a resonance. I spoke without knowing why. I want to remember. The wall responded, a low hum, different pitch, organic, like a cello string plucked under the earth. The counter signal. It poured into me, not through my ears, but through my skin. You are not a transmitter. You are a barrier. Hold the line. Images surged in. The flyers, the binder, the earpiece, the lesson plans, all of it designed to spread. But the counter signal wasn't interested in spreading. It was interested in containment. The building is a speaker, but it was never meant to be plugged in. You must sever the A. I whispered back. How? Stop obeying, stop teaching, stop repeating. Become friction. I left the basement changed. I didn't speak that day, not to anyone, not even to myself. I covered every vent in my apartment with aluminum foil and towels, unplugged every smart device, wrote only on napkins, flushed them when done. No more notebooks. No more journals. I saw Marcus in the hallway. He smiled that glassy smile. Still spine, he began. I cut him off. Spines bend. He froze, then walked away, stiffer than usual, like something in him had glitched. That night, the frequency screamed, not in words, in pressure, in pulses, like being crushed by knowledge. Lesson 15. Rebellion is rot, infection. Cure it or be consumed. You are no longer compliant. Prepare for correction. The walls shook. The lights blinked. Every vent in my apartment hissed open, releasing warm air that smelled faintly of metal. But I did not kneel. I did not chant. I sat in the middle of the room and whispered, I remember who I am. I remember silence. I remember before, and the frequency backed off, not defeated, but cautious, like it had underestimated me, like I had become a firewall. The next morning, every flyer in the building was gone, ripped down, erased. The spiral eye symbol scratched off the bulletin board with deep, angry gouges, and someone had written across the glass of the lobby display case, "The walls are listening, but they are not the only." Once I looked around. A woman from 4E met my eyes. Nodded once. Marcus looked confused. Mina's door was open again. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by old cassette tapes, headphones on, eyes closed, tears rolling down her cheeks. She had found it too, the counter signal, and it was spreading. But this time, we weren't students. We were the resistance. The counter signal gave no orders. It didn't teach with lessons. It asked questions. Do you remember who you were before the sound? What would you say if no one was listening? Are you speaking or are you repeating? That last one cut deep, because I didn't know anymore. Every word that left my mouth now felt like it passed through a filter first. Every sentence paused in my throat while a committee decided if it was correct, if it aligned with protocol. But now, something in me had shifted, not just doubt, choice. And that was the one thing the original frequency couldn't survive. The walls didn't like what we were becoming. Mina started distributing cassette tapes through the laundry room, old thrift store tapes with jazz, classical, ambient sounds, but hidden inside them, in the spaces between tracks, was the counter-signal. We called them feedback loops. Each tape passed hand to hand. No one said a word, no flyers, no symbols, just a glance, a nod, a shared memory of something we hadn't been taught. People began unplugging devices, covering vents, painting over symbols. Marcus relapsed. The signal in him flared like a dying bulb. He stood in the lobby screaming phrases that no longer worked. Still spine, quiet knees, still spine, obey, obey. Then he collapsed. We carried him to the boiler room, wrapped him in blankets, left a tape by his side. When he woke, he didn't remember the lessons, only the silence. I returned to the basement. The crack in the wall had widened. There was something behind it now, a soft glow. Not light, not sound, a feeling. I stepped through, found myself in a narrow corridor of smooth stone and insulation. No pipes, no wiring, just memory. The walls whispered, not commands, not slogans, but echoes of us, the way we had been before. I heard Ari's laugh, Mina's old voice, from before the whispers, even my own. The voices were layered like sediment, the strata of who we used to be, and in that space, I understood. The building hadn't been built on haunted ground. It had been programmed, constructed, not just with concrete and drywall, but with intent. Structure designed to teach obedience through resonance, a vessel for someone or something to distribute a curriculum. But something had gone wrong, a leak in the signal, a rebellion in the code, the counter-signal. We weren't the first to hear it, but we might be the first to answer it. The final lesson came without a number, no voice, no vent, no hum. It came from inside me. You cannot stop the frequency, but you can create feedback. You can make the signal eat itself. All you need to do is let them all speak at once. Chaos. The one thing control can't digest. So that night at 3:13, we gathered in the basement. 27 of us, each with a cassette tape, each playing a different version of the counter-signal. No headphones, just sound, feedback, resonance, disorder. The walls screamed, not with words, with distortion. With rage, lights shattered, pipes hissed, the floor trembled, and the sound collapsed in on itself. A silence deeper than sleep. Then, stillness. The next morning, the ground was quiet. No buzzing, no flyers, the air tasted new. Mina left a note under my door. We don't speak of the frequency anymore, but we remember what it tried to do, what it failed to do, and what we stopped. The tapes are gone, the blueprints destroyed, the binders burned, but our memories are intact. We keep the silence alive, not as students, as sentinels. I walked the halls that day and heard no whisper, only the quiet shuffle of lives returning, and once, just once, I passed the mirror in my bathroom, and it didn't smile. It just looked back like a reflection should.